active love, dancing, being active, and a little bit adventurous. And a part of being a business person is also about risk-taking. So you can see here me skydiving in the past, as well as also going on a hot air balloon. And just like within business, sometimes you have to evaluate the things that you do. And as I've become a mom, I've minimized those risks again, and it very much correlates with business, that as you're an entrepreneur and starting your business, you have to take some risk, and as you become a little bit more established and people are depending upon you, there are certain things that you need to keep in mind to make sure that those people are employed. And most of this presentation is actually going to be geared towards that. So it's, as a marketer, the things that we need to do to make sure that we're keeping our company going and moving. So also just some other stuff that Sally has gone over, as well as those that do tweet. Today, we're going to be using the hashtag marketing mistakes. So for those that didn't make it, if there's little things you want to say on Twitter, letting people know about anything that's been said, just to let them know, we'll be using that as a hashtag. So like I said, I'm a bit of a singer, so each of my mistakes are going to be related to musical songs. So the first marketing mistake that I tend to find whenever I'm working with firms is that they tend to think all clients want to hear about them. So as you're going out from a marketing perspective or on sales calls, depending on the role that you're in, one of the key things to keep in mind is that we want to make sure that it is about the client and not about us. So the question that I ask you is, as you are approaching clients, do you talk about your client or do you talk about your firm as you're discussing and beginning that conversation with them? And what I would like to do is tell you a little bit of the story, just to give a little bit of an illustration related to this particular area. It really has to do with, one, understanding the value of your firm. So not necessarily having to talk necessarily about always talking about your firm, but talking in a way of how it relates to the client, and also making sure that as you are going about talking to that particular client, you're keeping in mind the value that you bring to be able to differentiate your firm, as well as you as an employee, how you can impact things that you are doing from a marketing perspective as you're talking to clients. People really are looking at you as a person, so it really has to do with your influence. So for those that were had signed up the last time, you may or may not know that my father has passed away, and he passed away the day before I was supposed to present. So he is actually one of the people that has been an influence in my life that really taught me how to portray value to a client and to show that it is about a client. My dad was a service person. He was the Iceman within growing up, and everyone knew him as that. He would compete against different companies, and most of the time those companies would come and they would come at a lower price, and they would try to take the business away. And as I was listening and learning from my dad, one of the things that I learned is that he never competed on price. He knew what his value was. He was a hard worker. He was one of those people that you could depend on. And for those that do or don't know about this type of industry, when it comes to summertime, when it comes to holidays, you are working nonstop as an ICE person because people are depending upon that particular service. So my dad was one of those people that he made sure that your place did not run out of ice, especially during those particular critical times. So he knew that those companies would end up coming back to him, those stores would come back to him, because the service that they would get, even though they were getting a less of a price, they then weren't going to have what it is that they needed to be able to keep their business going and to have the product available to them. So he knew that where his value lied. And so in talking with clients, he really focused on the fact of what was important to clients and then related that back to his value. And so as you start to think about you personally and the value that you bring to a business, this is a sort of a little assessment that you can start to take a look at offline. This is done through a video, so you can come back to this and sort of evaluate your value and the value that you bring to a company. So as, what type of relationships can you bring? What type of knowledge, intuition, your character, who are you, your experience, past successes and ability. And then give yourself an assessment on a scale of 1 to 10. So in order to increase your law of influences or to increase your influence and your value with your company, you can then take a look at this and see what areas you would need to increase. So if you find that maybe you don't have enough relationships to be able to really influence and to help the company to find new people, what are some of the things that you can do to try to do that? Maybe it's joining an association. I have to say that that was one of the key things that that I actually didn't have whenever I first started out. I was always one of those behind-the-scenes type people, and everybody knew my name. They were like, oh, I know your name, but I've actually never met you. So one of the things that I proactively did was I got more involved in a particular organization, which happened to be S&PS. I got involved, became a president, got involved in committees, those types of things. And it's amazing the amount of then influence or the connections that you tend to get by doing those types of things. So my story is really to think about you as a person and how you can bring value. And also then take this out to other people within your firm that are looking to build business and that are looking to be able to make a difference, and see how they may also increase these particular traits or improve upon them. So ultimately, don't forget about who you are as a business person, but that main focus is to put your clients' interests first as you are talking to them. One of the next areas really has to do with your messaging, and are you differentiating your message related to clients? And so as you start to think about that, I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later on. However, one of the key things that I find related to clients as they're really looking at going after firms is that they really don't understand who it is that they're targeting. So with that, one of the biggest things that I can encourage you to do is to think about that and segment your audience. So, there are things that you put on your website. There are things that you have internally. So thinking about how you segment your clients and how you're going to target them is one of the biggest things that I find that people don't necessarily do whenever I'm dealing with them from a CRM perspective. And really this relates back to your marketing plan. It's also understanding that not all targets are equal, and I'll give you an example of this. So as you are going after a particular client, it might be based on role, or it may be based on the type of company that they are. And keeping in mind where you are economically, where the economy is. So, if there is a particular downturn in a particular segment, maybe that's not where you focus all of your effort to get business, but it's also not keeping, not focusing. It's important not to neglect them. So it's continue to connect with those individuals, but maybe those aren't your real focus on how you're going to be getting business as you diversify. Those other ones might come back in. So it's important to have this segmentation to be able to help you with business, to understand where you're getting the business, where you should be focusing your effort on right now. Also, segmenting helps you overall with just overall company decisions. So what I was just explaining regarding who it is that you target, as well as being able to look at the information and understand what has been successful, what hasn't been successful, how do you need to adjust marketing. Maybe a particular market is doing really well, but another market isn't doing really well. So It's being able to evaluate that information to determine if you need to take some action to be able to help those particular departments or maybe even individuals on what it is that they need to do to be able to improve upon their success rate. Also, from a proposal perspective or just messaging in general, it's important to be able to have marketing data that is segmented so you can see the statistical type of information. So for this particular type of work, let's say that it's healthcare, what statistics could you potentially provide within that proposal? So by searching out the clients and understanding what portion of your business is within that market, maybe that's something that statistically you're able to put in there. Some people, it is important to them how many projects you've done in a particular region. So things like that you can pull out from a statistical standpoint, that if you don't have that segmenting, it makes it much more difficult to be able to provide that type of real detail that can help differentiate your firm. Also looking at just overall trends along the way. So tracking your progression or recession of things, so understanding when things are getting better, when things are getting worse on particular items, so just being able to have overall trends. So when you're thinking about segmenting, one of the key things is to think about the company as a whole. That a lot of times people will focus on particular markets, but they may neglect other areas that they really are unsure of. So it's just making sure that you're looking at things from a global perspective instead of just what it is that you know. Also, as you're looking at segmenting, thinking about how you can streamline processes. So as you're looking at segmenting information, it might be that you need to be able to look at information in a particular area. So let's say that I'm wanting to understand how many projects we have done related to a particular type of client segment. Having that information to be able to look at that type of information so you can have a better understanding related to going after those clients. And where automation or processes can help you is to be able to have that information available but not duplicating the same information as you're looking at it. So the next mistake really has to do with these boots are made for walking. Does it relate back to what you do? One of the key things that I find as I'm working with people from a CRM perspective is I always try to bring in what the marketing plan is and relating it back to what they do. So does your firm have established goals, and do you measure them? So if you think about that, do you truly have established goals, and then do you measure them? So in this particular mistake, this is probably one of the key things that I find that people don't do within their firm. And the reason I'm going to show you why I think that the majority of the firms don't is because of how you establish goals, and then also just the fact of, are you actually measuring them? So I'm going to go over a couple of things. I'm not going to go over each of these items here. However, when you're establishing goals, number one is very, very important. It's setting the goals and how you set the goals. I'm going to go over that in detail as to what really truly makes a goal. Because once you get to step number 10, measuring it, if it doesn't have the numbers or it doesn't have something you can actually prove, then it really isn't a goal. So you probably have heard about the SMART process, and with that, is it specific, measurable, assignable, realistic, and time-based. So as you are thinking about establishing your goals, there are the 3 C's that I like to call them. So it's clear. You know, does it fit and adhere to this SMART format? Is it consistent? So does it apply throughout the company? Is it something that everyone within the company knows that globally this is what your company goal is? And then how does that relate down? So does the department then support that goal that you set for the company? And then how do your individual goals then support the department, which then supports the company? That's a lot of times people will do company goals, but unless people really understand and know what they're supposed to do, it's really hard for them to be able to accomplish it. So communication is really important, making sure everyone's aware of what those goals are, and then how do they personally impact and influence those goals. So a couple of things, resources available to you to be able to look at as you're setting goals is also to understand within your industry, whichever industry you're in, what is it that other people are doing? What are those particular metrics that are important? And here are some places that you can go and take a look at that have benchmarking information. So you're not starting from scratch. You can look at what other people are doing, not only what other firms are doing that are on an average perspective, but also looking at what it is that the people, the firms that are exceeding the industry standard, what is it that they're doing? What are the types of metrics that are related to them? One of them I'll point out is the Deltec. If you're in the architectural and engineering industry, there is the Clarity Report. So if you're not familiar with that, at the end I'll provide our website, and we have that type of information that you can download and take a look at that. But it provides some really good information just overall where people are at statistically within your industry. S&PS, of course, is a great resource to be able to see things related to marketing. There's also some other ones here that you may or may not have heard of. Forrester, Gartner, big ones, marketing agency, Hinge, IDC, and then Vision Edge Marketing. A lot of those also do surveys throughout the year, so you can be a part of that type of survey. So as you are looking at your marketing efforts, one of the biggest things related to the marketing plan is, do you tie your marketing efforts back to your marketing plan? A lot of times people are going about doing the marketing efforts and, whoops, at the beginning of the year I originally created this marketing plan. Did it actually relate back? Does it relate back to what it is we're supposed to be doing? So as you're establishing your goals, one of the key things to sort of keep in mind is, what do you need to improve? So let's say, for example, you want to improve upon revenue. Who doesn't? But as you're looking at those types of things, it's important to go back and establish why it is, how it is that you got to where you're at, and also looking at it just over the past years. So if we were to look over the past 5 years, here's some of the information we might look at. We might look at, well, what was the revenue for the past 5 years? Where did our revenue come from? We might find that at different times the revenue came from different clients or markets or services. So it's important to keep those things in mind. Within the year, how many new or unique clients worked with you throughout each of those years? Looking at other things related to even AR and project management, so understanding write-offs and days of sales outstanding. Understanding utilization and net multiplier. I know it might scare some marketing people, but as I've continued on through my career, this is one of the key things that I have found, that people that excel career-wise, they really start to understand the ins and outs and really sort of the accounting things that are important to keep a firm going, because you really do impact these types of things, and I'll explain that as we continue on and give you some examples. As you're setting your goals, one of the things to keep in mind is that we don't want to just improve revenue. How can I measure that? Oh, okay, well, we went from 50,000 to 60,000. Okay, well, that's improving. Or is it? How many write-offs did you have? Did you actually did you net that in revenue? So it's those types of things that you have to keep in mind. And also, if you're following that SMART rule, we can say we want to increase revenue. We might even say net revenue 20% by the end of the calendar year. So does that meet that particular SMART format? Yes, it's very specific. It's measurable. I can say, yes, we have or haven't done this. It's, is it assignable? Those are some of the things you have to think about. And, is it overall time bound? This is one of the things. So it's by the end of the calendar year. Sometimes you might do it by quarter or by month. So having a time-bound understanding of when you want the goal to be accomplished. As you continue down through the goals, you then have to establish of all that stuff that you researched, well, what did you find? What is it that you need to focus on in order to achieve that goal? So, maybe you've determined that I need to increase new clients. I need to increase existing client business. All that sounds, like a no-brainer. But as you start to go down to some of these goals, then you're putting true numbers and you're putting meat to those goals. So it's not only just I increase new clients, it's identify and close one new customer each quarter. Each quarter, choose 2 existing customers and close an additional 2% of business. And you'd be surprised at just that fact of closing new business with firms that you're really targeting that are beyond the things that just come in, how that actually can help you. And so, thinking about things from a sales, a marketing, and operations perspective. So improving utilization. Maybe you're finding that utilization is having an issue. Or maybe you're finding you don't have client references that will help you be able to close the business. Or maybe you're finding that you're having scope creep. So there's certain things that you need to address there to make sure that you've taken care of that. So you'll notice with each of these goals, they're very specific. They are time-bound. It's definitely something I can measure. So as you are developing these goals, these are the other things you need to keep in mind. Who's responsible for tracking that information? How often will you do it? So if you want that information on a quarterly basis, maybe you're tracking it on a monthly basis, but you're at least reporting upon it on a quarterly basis. Are you receiving the data early enough in real time to be able to make the changes? That's one of the key things that I find is that is it a lagging or is it a leading type of information that you need to be able to make those decisions? Who's involved to institute the change and who will communicate that to employees? So these are some of the decision things to keep in mind as you're establishing these types of goals. One of the key things I want to sort of give as a warning as we've worked with people on goals that they're wanting to be able to monitor within their system, you might find that you even have some unintended consequences. So as an example, there's a blog and a webinar down there of an example of this. But a good example that sort of relates to marketing staff is I want to improve customer service. Well, customer service is a non-billable work and, in effect, also can lower the utilization. So if you tell employees that their pay raises or even bonuses are going to be based upon meeting their utilization and also not telling them that they'll be incentivized upon improving customer service, then you're telling them which item is most important. So the billable stuff is most important, this other stuff isn't. And I can say, improving customer service is definitely one of the things, or customer satisfaction, looking at that, that's just as important, otherwise you're not going to have the business coming back. So as you're looking at establishing those goals, it's also important to incentivize or look at ways that you can evaluate and put those metrics upon people and look at all the things that are important. These are just 2 examples of how it can negatively impact something that you may not have intended. And as I stated in this particular blog article, it talks about another one related to project managers. So one of the other things to keep in mind related to your marketing plan and as you're doing marketing overall is just to understand, when should I walk away? And, the bigger question is, do you? A lot of times people are so eager to get business that sometimes they don't take the time to really understand, is this right for the firm? Should we really be doing this? How can this impact us? And more importantly, would it be something that we shouldn't do because we really can't help the client? So as you're thinking about that, I always try to apply sort of the 80-20 rule to things. So how does it fit into your business overall? What I tend to find is that of the customers that you are going after, 80% of the sales is generated by 20% of the customers. And also, on the flip side, most complaints, 80% of complaints, come from 20% of the customers. So it's identifying of those complaints, well, why is it that you're getting those particular types of complaints? Are you really just not a good fit for this particular type of firm, or is it just, you need to be more responsive, what is it? But if you consistently see that a particular client is constantly complaining, it's identifying whether those reoccurring complaints, are you really a good fit? And should you gracefully back out of doing business with that particular client? So the next mistake that I want to focus on has to do with the, we are the champions, and it's really, more about teamwork overall. So I want to tell a little bit story. For those that don't know who this is on the screen, this is the Jamaican bobsled team. So I may be dating myself, but they debuted back in 1988 at the Winter Olympics. And they quickly became a very popular and were ultimately the underdog story of the game. The team was very experienced going down had very little experience going down a bobsled, and they borrowed spare sleds from other countries to compete. And as you can see, this is one of the ways that they prepared so they could work as a team. They didn't officially finish as they actually lost control of the sled and crashed during one of the 4 runs. However, they showed significant improvements throughout the games and actually impressed people and the observers with some of their fast starts. That was one of the key things people really liked about them. But overall, they stuck with it and they evolved. And one of the things they started later on in the 1994 Winter Olympics, they actually qualified again, and they stunned many of the critics by finishing in 14th place, which was actually ahead of the United States and even Russia, Australia, and France. Then in 2000, the Jamaican bobsled team won the gold medal at the World Push Championship in Monaco. And then in 2002, the Salt Lake City Winter Olympics, 2-man team of this group ended up doing ended up going down, and they ended up getting a track record. So what I want to share with you related to this is really there are some lessons learned that you can learn from the Jamaican bobsled team to ensure that your firm overall is a champion. So the big thing is don't go at it alone. Ultimately, it is important that as a group, we're looking at all of the team members that are going to allow us to be able to accomplish things as a team. So it's understanding that each person makes up what it is that you're trying to do. So it's making sure that the people that you have around you are people that are going to help you grow and help you as not only a person but also overall the company. So one of the things that I wanted to share with you is about a survey that we did related to growth. And so one of the surveys that we wanted to learn how firms...
Sarah,
yes.
Can I break in here for a moment? I just had someone in a question indicating that they're getting some feedback. I don't know if you're... are you on your phone? Not sure if
I am.
If there's
Are
something...
we having any more issues? If people can let me know.
Yeah. Someone had popped in and said that they were getting some feedback. Okay, some say feedback, some say no, so let's keep going, and maybe it's on just a few people's ends. Go ahead.
Okay. All right. I'll be a little more mindful. Maybe it's me up against my phone. So one of the key things that we looked at when we were looking at growth is that we looked at how firms use KPIs to measure growth and the commonality to chart the growth. So one of the biggest things that I want to point out to you is that we sent this, for the most part, it was finance people that ended up reporting back as to growth. What we found is that growth was indeed one of the #1 goals for a firm. And however, the definition of growth really differed among all of the different firms. One of the biggest things that I wanted to point out is that when we received the information from the individuals, what we found was that the respondents showed a lack of actually charting and writing and tracking KPIs. And for those that don't know what KPIs, because I had someone ask this question, it's key performance indicators, which are really goals. So it's, understanding what it is you're trying to achieve and then measuring that and making sure that you've achieved it. What we found is that even the finance people were struggling with this. So the reason I want to point that out for marketing people, don't automatically assume that your finance people know how to do this. There are lots of finance people that do, but you may have to go at it as a group. So it's going in and not feeling intimidated by asking them to help you and then getting the resources that you need to help you to identify what those goals are. Where I found the finance group helps the most is that, they really understand the numbers. They understand how to measure things. So that's really where I would encourage marketing people to get with their finance staff and say, here's what I'm looking to measure. This is what I would like to improve. How could we measure this? And so working with them on that. One of the other things as you start to look at your overall marketing plan is that it's really important to think like a CEO. And what I mean by that is think about results and not about activities. I was talking with actually a CFO one time, and one of the things that he ended up saying to me is that marketing staff come to me and or even business developers, they get so excited that they got a lunch meeting with someone. He's like, that's not results. That's just an activity. There's nothing from that. So it's important that as you start to report upon these things, that you think as a CEO or even think like a CFO. So as you're discussing things related to marketing, it's important to think about the results, and specifically, is marketing making the firm money? So as you start to think about those things, and as you're talking about these things with people, I find that you will get better, have better communication with your finance people as well as with executives if you start talking in their language. And this is really sort of their language. So when you discuss results, do you talk in activities or measurable results? Are you connecting the dots from the marketing budget that you planned to the actual results? This is probably one of the biggest things that finance people struggle with, and the biggest mistake that they think that marketing people do is that, they want to spend. For whatever reason, I'm the exact opposite. I'm typically a little bit more conservative, but it's always making sure that what you budget actually goes back to the plan. So, you want to go to that trade show, you want to go to this or that, or if we want to do all of these different types of things, is that actually something that relates back to the plan? And then how can you tell them whether you got results or not? So ultimately, are you focusing on effectiveness related to the efforts that you're looking at? And I find that if you focus on those types of things as you're talking, if you're wanting to continue to move up within the ranks, that's one of the key things that that marketers can focus on and improve upon. So what do you track within your firm? One of the things that through S&PS, they conducted a survey and reported that these are what firms are following, or the marketing metrics that they're looking at. You'll notice that this has 2012 and 2013 information. And again, the survey will go out, so if you're not involved, or if you are involved, look for that and participate in that. And you'll notice that for the most part, it stayed relatively the same. There were some things that went up and other things that went down, but ultimately the order of things ended up staying relatively the same. So win and loss, are you looking at those types of things? Are you looking at client satisfaction? Are you looking at your overall pipeline and forecasting of the resources that you have, or what you potentially have coming in the pipeline from a sales perspective? And so some of the other things, referrals, and as well as the cost versus the cost of a proposal, or different efforts related to what the revenue was that you generated. So I want to show you some examples of some things to be able to show you some of the things that can show effectiveness. So the last item that I talked about was expenses versus the revenue. So as an example, even within your proposals, one of those types of things that you can do is evaluate how much effort is being spent related to going after that particular effort. Or if you don't want to get that detailed, at least document what it is that you're doing for a particular market. So everything related to that, document what are the costs related to that, how much time did I spend towards that, and then evaluate that compared to what it is you actually won. So you can see in this example, these are pretty good. The job costs and labor costs overall compared to what it is that we won, we're doing a pretty good job. But if this was flipped, or if it was the green and the purple were really, really high, let's say that we spent $500,000 in getting business and all we won was $650,000. Was that worth it? Well, I don't know. Maybe the $650,000, it was at the beginning of the year, and this was a brand new client. So, maybe that was worth it. Or overall, if this was multiple opportunities, it's just important to understand how much effort you're putting in towards things, and are you actually getting the results? Are you making revenue for the firm? Now, anybody that's here that's more executive-related or finance-related would also say, well, this is only part of the puzzle. There's also, what type of profit did we have write-off, all of those types of things. But, for a marketer, this is one of the key things that you can focus on, at least on your side, to better understand whether you're getting results. There's not much you can do about profitability and write-offs and things like that. That's really something that's more project management related. This helps you to understand from a marketing perspective whether you're doing the job that you need to do. One of the other things you saw in there was hit rate. So you'll notice that in this particular example, William Apple has a 50% hit rate, whereas Ann has a 33% hit rate. However, if we look at it a little bit differently, that was based on the number of opportunities divided by what they actually had won. You'll notice in this example it's completely flipped because we looked at it in a completely different way. We're looking at the revenue. So we're looking at, well, of the stuff that William has gone after, how much money has he actually brought in? So you'll see that Ann actually has a better hit rate than William does when we're looking at revenue. So it's important to look at both of those things because what you might find is that one person might be going after a lot of different things, and so their revenue is lower because maybe if they had just focused their effort a little bit more, maybe they could have won some of the other ones that were out there. And also just understanding the trends of individuals or markets to understand, do you need to make an adjustment to make sure that you're winning more? An example of this is that before I even had a system to be able to report this type of thing, I used to do it in an Excel spreadsheet. I had a particular manager that was constantly bringing me stuff to be able to do proposals on, and I knew the majority of them we weren't going to win. So I simply just started tracking with how the success rate of how we were doing, and then documenting, of the information, all of the things that we were going after, how successful we were. That type of information and going back to it and showing statistics will help you to be able to make a change within your firm if you see that you're spending a lot of time on things that you really shouldn't be going after. One of the related to that, it's important to understand and admit when something doesn't work. And this is a quote that I really like by Steven Spielberg. It's not that you shouldn't try. All good ideas start as bad ideas. That's why it takes so long. But it's understanding, did you learn from those, and are you evolving, and are you getting better? So with that, mistake number 4 really has to do with don't go chasing waterfalls. Stay focused and understand your impact. So you may have heard this particular analogy or this particular term before, the shotgun versus the rifle effect. And this is really important related to marketing, that we understand the impact, where we're making an impact. So we're wanting to make that shotgun, we're not wanting to go after a shotgun, we're wanting to have a rifle effect. We're wanting to have a bigger hole versus all of these little holes, but no success. So we're looking for the biggest result. So one of the things that you can look at regarding tracking this type of thing is your go, no go. So back to that particular story I was talking about with that particular manager, this was also one of the things that I looked at was the go, no go process of ranking where I thought whether we should or shouldn't go after things, and then identifying whether we were successful or not. And then going back to all the ones that we were unsuccessful, so where we have a hit rate of 20%, and all of these I ranked them as a no-go because they were below this particular percentage. So what this is it's just averaging out the go-no-go rate, so you can better understand as you're doing those particular types of metrics that you can figure out where is your average related to winning projects. So in this particular example, you can see that winners average about 78.08%. So, and it completely depends on how you do this, but a lot of people will do go, no go and have a percentage related to the questions that they have, and it generates a particular percentage of should you go or shouldn't you go. And so based on whatever that number is, you find some trends that tell you anything that's below this particular number, I shouldn't go after. And then maybe you have an in-between period of, well, maybe we should get a principal's approval to be able to go after this because there's some, the percentage isn't very high. And then there's some that it's, yep, these are winners, these are ones that we should be going after. So one of the other things is to understand the impact on the company, as well as on other employees as you're starting to ask people to assist you. I know as marketers, a lot of times we, but we need it. Please, 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 help me with what I, with what I need. But it's understanding the impact of sometimes also of your request. And so as you are talking to billable people that you are needing assistance with, it's also understanding what their other priorities are. Billable work will always be a priority, unfortunately. However, there are other things that they do, like I said, that they do need to focus on. So if you are expecting, from example, a project manager to help you with some specific things, you need to understand the impact on them that might impact their utilization rate. So as you're looking at the different processes and what it is related to even your marketing plan that you're expecting different people to do, it's also important for you to understand what their utilization rate and how will that impact it. So, for example, when we're hiring people and we expect them to do a lot of business development type work, well, their utilization rate probably is going to be much lower. So it totally depends on the different markets, how much effort is involved. How much new work are you going after in that particular market? That's going to require more business development effort, which means a lower utilization rate for that person. Where other firms or other people, maybe they, new business is not as important as existing business. New business is something you want to focus on, but maybe it's not as big of an effort because you have an established base. So you're really looking at your existing client base and getting more business from them. So therefore, the amount of business development is probably lower than the work that would be required to go after a new business line. Also, do you just, do you understand overall as you're budgeting people, how much of that time is spent on marketing and business development? And it's also important just overall to understand, build a rapport with project managers so you understand what's on their plate, and are you finding ways to make things more efficient? So we tend to rely upon project managers quite a bit to be able to help us with proposals or the different things that we're doing. So it's important to see if there are things that we can do to streamline it. Would it be better to have an administrative person do that? are there ways that we can help them to streamline processes so they're not having to do as much, or it's quicker, or it's easier for them. It wasn't until I became a project manager that I realized how much I actually was putting upon project managers. And then whenever you actually become a project manager and you understand all the things that you're having to keep in mind related to keeping a project going, checking AR, all of those different types of things, you get a little bit of a different perspective. So the last marketing mistake is, I feel for you, I think I love you. So it's about understanding and evoking an emotion with your clients and really with your prospects. So this really has to do more with getting new business. And this particular company called Quo Communications, I'm going to be focusing on something that they have. They have a video out there that does a great job of illustrating how to evoke emotion, and specifically through distinctiveness. And the video down below, there's a hyperlink that you guys can go look at that, but I have taken sort of screenshots of this so I can explain sort of the process related to it. But it's a great branding communications firm that's here in Atlanta called Quo Communications, and specifically Rick Julian. So this information is based on over 100 years of psychological and neuroscientific research that has been conducted. And it was by some of the leading scientists in the world. And it's about how the human mind works, and specifically how it relates to memory and how that wisdom can be applied overall to your brand. Unique sensory experiences attract attention because the brain assigns additional processing to them in a way to enhance memory. If we present people with objects to be remembered, and among those things, one of the things is unique, the brain labels it distinctive. And as a result, it is called the isolation effect, and it enhances memory for the different objects. And then science tells us that with this, the white blocks are being filtered out by your brain from further processing. And while the red dot is actively engaging your prefrontal cortex, the red dot has surprised your brain. So it's drawing attention, and in the process has made it more memorable. Now it's important to realize that differentiation and distinctiveness are not the same. And differentiation alone will not engage the isolation effect. So I'd like to demonstrate this. So here is our distinctiveness in the red dot. When other people can provide other differentiators like a lower price, differentiate features on benefits, or more colors, you'll notice that your brain automatically goes to the red dot, so it still wins. And in fact, the only way that you can compete with this is to match its distinctiveness. So now my brain is moving towards the green dot, and then you can activate your differentiators. So it might be something like a lower price, or it may be more about your value and your features and your benefits. So I wanted to sort of give this illustration that as you're looking at marketing overall, it's how are you distinguishing or being distinct among your competitors. And if you look at the rest of this video, he gives you some real-life examples of how you can differentiate your firm, but keeping in mind your overall brand and how you can sort of stand out amongst other people within your industry. We actually went through sort of an analysis with him when we were looking at our brand. And one of the things that we found is that everyone within our industry, or the people that were in our particular group, were blue logos. There were certain things that stood out related to them that all looked the same. So one of the things that we did, even with just color, is that we really looked at how we were different, how could we differentiate ourselves. And we really did a great job of doing that. And that's one of the key things that I think is important, is as you're looking at new clients and as you're looking to overall retain new clients, it's how do you stand out amongst the crowd? How can you be different? So as we continue on into this last mistake, it's also looking at what is your firm doing to retain clients. And this is probably one of the most important things to focus on, is because of your business, they say statistically that between 5 to 7% of, it takes 5 to 7% more effort to go after new business than it does to keep existing clients happy. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this. So managing your client expectations is really important related to keeping business. And when S&PS did a survey as to why clients leave, an astonishing 68% said that they quit because of an attitude of indifference towards the client by some employee. So you remember what I talked about earlier, that it's about people. It's about the people within your firm. And then how are they differentiating you, as well as how are they treating the clients that they're doing business with to make sure that you're not a part of that 68%. You'll notice that of the other numbers, 3% moved away, 5% developed other friendships, 9% left for competitive reasons. The numbers are much lower. Most of the time, people just don't feel loved. And so a lot of times they feel, yeah, what's the difference? I'll just go to this other firm. So if you focus on how you can retain clients, there was a study done by Harvard that actually they found that 5% increase in client retention can increase profits by 25 to 95%. Additionally, here are some other statistics that have been done by S&PS as well as other organizations. So research indicates that 54 to 70% of clients who register a complaint will do business with the firm again if their complaint is resolved. So it's just a matter of one knowing. But half of the time, unfortunately, the problem is that the average business never hears from 96% of the unhappy clients because they never asked. So, if their issue is resolved promptly, they found that retention actually will jump to 95%. So it's just a matter of managing those expectations and ultimately just asking. And research indicates that relationship between employee attitudes and client-related variables accounted for 40 to 80% of client satisfaction. We're doing business with people. Project managers are working with project managers. Executives are working with executives. Everybody is working on their level, so it's important that people are asking and seeing how they can create a better client loyalty. And there's that statistics that I told you about, 6 to 7 times more expensive to gain a new client than to retain an existing client. This is probably one of the key things that I find that people spend too little time on the marketing plan focusing on, because this is the brunt end of your business. If you're not keeping your clients, your existing client base, how can you continue to grow as a firm? Because it takes a lot of effort to get that new client. Some of the other things just to sort of keep in mind related to customer satisfaction is that you can see that really it has to do with a perceived, and whenever I say perceived, it's more about the client themselves. It may or may not be true, but what do they perceive it to be? So what is their perceived value? And all of these things are intertwined with each other related to customer satisfaction. So the perceived employee satisfaction, how satisfied are they, which then impacts the perceived employee commitment by the client, and the perceived employee loyalty impacts that as well. And then that impacts the perceived product or quality or service overall. So one of the things that you can do is, instead of asking a client at the end of a project what it is that you can do better, it's important that you ask them throughout the life cycle of a project. And this is an example that throughout the life cycle, if you ask a particular client, or if you wait till the end, let's say, to ask a client, hey, the project is over, how did I do? And they're like, oh man, you guys, we had this, this, and this, and you probably already know this. We had all these things wrong, so even though you did all of these little checks, all of these things right, they're still remembering that one thing. However, if you ask them along the way and then you deal with that particular item at that moment, you're being proactive. You're taking care of it instead of reactive. You will find that the average feedback at the end of the project will completely change. So thinking about the overall life cycle of a project, when is it important, when does the client need you the most? What we've found is that the client really needs you at the beginning. But as time goes on, they need you less and less and less. So therefore, when is it that you're getting that final check? If they're unhappy, then you may be missing out on that final money. So if you're asking people and getting the feedback, the FBs or feedback, if you're getting the feedback along the way, then you're able to focus on making sure that you have success and you're improving the relationship overall and you're identifying those issues along the way. One of the things that actually the client feedback tool has actually taught us is that there are sort of 6 different areas to look at. That there's the human side and there's the mechanics of it. So it's, the human side is the overall leadership, staff performance, staff retention, and then the mechanics are, well, what is the profitability, what is the liability, and the marketing. And so with this, these are the things that they ended up monitoring. And it actually addresses that problem that people have by asking at the end of the project. And so one of the stories that I really like is that, let's say that for any of you that have gone through a divorce, let's say that you go back to your ex and say, hey, how could I have been a better wife? Or how could I have been a better husband? You're asking that particular person, and his perception might be completely different than the next person that you start to date. So therefore, you need to talk to the person in the middle of the relationship to see how you can improve. And it's the same thing related to your clients, that if you're not asking that question along the way and then adjusting it along the way, then you just don't know, and then you end up losing a client and you didn't even know why. So these 6 areas are related to these different types of things, and you can see this different metrics that you can slide the scale up and down a little bit, but ultimately it always starts at met expectations, and it always sort of evaluates the process. And keep in mind, this isn't related to people. It's related to the overall process of how the job is doing or how the delivery of the project is going. Overall, are we responsive? Are we handling scope and fees? Are we keeping on schedule? So if you get something that's going down that's not met expectations in the middle, you can then immediately address it, figure out what it is you need to do. Maybe you need more meetings. Maybe, there are maybe you need to get more resources, whatever it is, but you're able to adjust to it at that moment. Therefore, as you're then reevaluating or getting that feedback again, you then can increase and improve and see that you're meeting the expectations of your clients and then overall retaining them. Also, once you start to combine feedback with financial information, this gives you all kinds of other information. So it tells you who you should be focusing on and maybe who is a poor fit. So by taking that information and combining it together, you really understand who your key clients are, who it is that you should be focusing on. So I want to take a time, and maybe there were questions that were asked throughout, but I just want to take now a moment just to see of this presentation if there's other things that you might have questions about, other things that you might want me to go back and focus on a little bit more or clarify. So if you can let me know if you have any questions. And so I'll turn it back over to Sally and see if we have any.
Thanks, Sarah. Yes, we do have some questions, and please, everyone, continue to send in your questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. Going back to mistake number 1, a question, do you have some specific examples of how to share your differentiators without seemingly talking about yourself, the firm? You had pointed out, I think, in the beginning that you didn't want to be, you're so vain. Do you have any specific examples of how they might do that?
So if I'm understanding the question right, so what are the types of value that you can have that differentiate you from someone else.
And how can you share that with your
understand?
clients, yes, without coming across as talking all about you?
I got you. Yeah, so, it's really important that one of the key things that I have found is that if you tend to ask questions about a firm and about what their challenges or what their pains are, and you're really understanding their business, and then you're addressing those pains, in essence, you're talking and you're providing them the value of your knowledge, or you're providing them your experience. Now, you're not coming in and saying, oh, yeah, well, in this project we did this. You never want to say, relate them to, sort of put them in a box. It's addressing specifically their particular items, and sometimes it might just be, continuing to dive in. What I find is that if you are, I tend to find that questions can say more than answers. That by the quality of the questions you ask, people then understand that you know your stuff, that you're asking the right type of questions. I would say that that's probably one of the key things that I find. So you're demonstrating your value without even answering the question in a lot of ways, based on continuing to dive in further and understanding their challenges.
Okay, great. Sarah, before we go to the next question, I've had a request if you would put your speaker background slide up again.
Oh, sure. Back at the very beginning?
I think so, yes.
I can also do this real quick. I'm going to go back to these things. But I'm just going to go over a couple of things that if you're needing my information, I'm not sure if that's what they're meaning, but here is my contact information if anybody needs it.
Great. Okay, so I did have a couple of other questions. Again, back to mistake number one, you talked about the law of influences. Is there some way, do you recommend, is there a way that you can use the law of influences for your company to see where your firm can grow in addition to the individuals within it?
I find that the law of influences really has to do with people. Because each of them are very specific to a skill set of an individual, that I find that it is geared more towards a person versus towards the company overall.
Gotcha. Okay. Another question here, it says the link below the distinctiveness slide is hard to see. I guess when we send the slides, they'll be easier to see. But also, is there somewhere, they ask, is there somewhere that we can find some templates to track KPI?
Good question. Hang on one second. Yeah, the link, because I had clicked on it, it's showing up in a different color. So when you get it, you'll actually end up seeing it in white. So you'll be able to see that. And then a template related to KPIs. Ultimately, what I would suggest is going to those different resources that I provided. So even going to fullsailpartners.com and going to our website and going to, I want to say that it's under white papers. There are some examples related to some metrics of what people track and do related to their firm. So as an example, some of those are related to their average utilization. What is their net profitability? And keep in mind your KPIs and a lot of these types of things are going to be very, very, very specific to your firm. So you're doing that SWOT analysis to figure out your strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And then you're addressing your goals to overcome what those threats and overcome your weaknesses. And that's actually an exercise that we're going back through again here recently that I've been meeting with the management staff on. So it's always important to make sure that your goals are related to that. So if you're having a particular, you're finding that something is a particular issue, it needs to relate more to than just your business. Maybe it's related to your processes. Maybe it's related to a particular group, or or people not knowing knowledge sharing, or it could be related to all kinds of things. And so it's identifying how do you know that you've then resolved it. What is your tactic to be able to handle those things?
So you brought up something there that links to another question that was asked. Do you have any recommendations or suggestions for communicating goals across the company and increasing that level of communication?
Yeah, I think that overall you need to, as the management staff, as all of the key people are involved in making those goals, you really have to communicate it then out to the company. So, whether that's a company meeting or something along those lines, letting people know, here's what we're doing as a company. Then here's how our department is then supporting these particular items. And one of the things I really liked at a past company that we did, we actually had quarterly goals for us individually. And we do that in a different way here, but each quarter we had different things, and each of those then related back to the overall goal. With us, we do, overall yearly goals as to, we expect that, here's your specific goals, and it relates back, but it's done more yearly. So it is important that everyone, you take time to address every individual and understand what their goal is. Some of the people you might be able to sort of lump, project managers, here are their goals. So it might be individual groups understanding that these are the goals that your department is doing. These apply to project managers. These apply to designers, or whatever the different people are within your firm.
Okay. Another question, do you have any suggestions for smaller firms when they're trying to consistently measure goals and track metrics? If capacity is an issue, what do you recommend? Where do they start?
Yeah, so, whenever it comes to smaller firms, you really have to think, we're a small firm. We're only 22 people. You really have to think about the things that are going to make the bigger impact. So I always try to apply the 80-20 rule. So of these things, all of these things that we've identified that we need to do, can we lump, some of them into, do they all seem to be related to one particular thing? Maybe it's related to training. Maybe it's related to, something else. So it's, figuring out what is going to make the biggest impact and really minimizing the goals to make sure that you're getting that accomplished. That's really the best advice I can give, is just to narrow down and then figure out, how you're going to know that you've done that.
Okay.
Part of it is just identifying the goal itself.
The last question that I have at the moment, unless we get a few more coming up here, is you talked about discussing results with, results versus activity. Do you have any suggestions if you're a marketing coordinator, you're not maybe the marketing director, you're a marketing coordinator, and you are tracking some of this information, suggestions for how to bring this information to leadership?
One of the things, you have to play things a little careful, because the last thing that you want to do is to negatively impact your relationship with someone that is above you, that's in between, sort of that in-between manager. So it's, bringing that information to them and letting them, sometimes it might even be letting them be the person, seeing how they handle that type of thing. Hopefully they're saying, hey, so-and-so brought this to my attention. So hopefully they're giving you that type of credit. Ultimately, it's about, what's best for the company. But if you find, and I've run into this, that people that are, your superior that just don't get it, an executive wants to know. And so if you have brought it to that person's attention and they're not doing anything about it, and you've done everything that you can do to bring it to their attention, do what you need to. An executive is not going to, or at least at a firm I want to be at, an executive is not going to tell you this information is not valuable. They're going to appreciate that you took the time to evaluate this, and you have to come at it as, I was looking at things that we can do that I think can impact the company and increase our effectiveness. So it has to be that type of conversation. It's not, hey, I brought this to my manager and, they're not doing anything about it. It's coming at it as, I'm trying to help the firm. And one of the things that I found is this, and I wanted to share this with you. Is this something that you feel is important? And I can't see any executive not allowing someone to come, but you got to have your numbers. You got to have the statistics. You got to understand, all of the different things. I would recommend and encourage you to get an advocate through the finance staff as well. I'm sort of talking from experience on that particular question, so I'm not sure who asked that. You're welcome to reach out to me, and I can talk to you about it further. So,
thanks, Sarah. I don't see any other questions. I think you said you had a few other things you wanted just to wrap up with.
Yeah, so I just want to quickly go over a couple of things. Some of the other things, our firm is connected to the client feedback tool. For those that happen to be vision clients that are wanting to be able to connect the two together, so if you happen to be a client feedback tool or you're looking at the client feedback tool, we actually have an integration between Deltek Vision and the client feedback tool. And I got to say that this particular tool has really helped us and has really helped a lot of firms to be able to differentiate themselves. So going back to that question on, being able to show clients how you really impact, clients and how you're there to be able to listen to them and provide those types of statistics, this type of tool can really help you with that, and also really focus on that client retention. And so just a couple of other things just about sort of full sale. We are a Deltek Vision Premier Partner. We also do the integration with the client feedback tool. So from a marketing perspective, one of the key things we focus on is proposal automation, client relationship management. All of the things that you need to think about related to measuring metrics, building relationships, automating processes and proposals, working together, and being able to have access to that information. There are a lot of new advances. If you haven't seen or if your firm hasn't upgraded to the latest version, which is 7.3, and you're still on older versions, or if you haven't looked at Vision, reach out to me and let me know how we might help you. And then lastly, these are some of the statistics. We preach what we say. So we always look at how it is we're truly helping firms. So you can see, here are some examples of firms, the bottom one being one that we actually got a Project Excellence Award on how we helped this particular firm. The top firm is a smaller firm, and they were an SMB, but we helped them double in size due to implementing, Deltek Vision, because we were really focused on, what are the key areas of the things that they needed to be able to impact their firm. And here are just some other examples, proposal related, as well as just finance and project management related. And so if you need to reach Full Sail, here are some of the ways to reach out to us: LinkedIn, Twitter. We're constantly providing free information out there, white papers, webinars, blog articles on a weekly basis. So we're constantly providing free information out there to be able to help firms grow their business. And again, here's my contact information. And just a quick note, we actually will use the client feedback tool. And so we're going to be sending you a survey today. So if you're not familiar with that tool, we'll be sending you a survey so you can see what that is and go through that process. And we really do encourage you to let us know, how it is that we did, so we can better, help people as we present in the future.
Thanks, Sarah. And several people asked the question. Let me just pull up here a second. I got one more question coming in. It was someone who said thank you. We appreciate that. I want to let everybody know that we will be making the PowerPoint slides available as a PDF, and the presentation has been recorded, so that link will be made available to you as well. Thanks again, Sarah, very much. We're a few minutes ahead of time, but I guess that's not a bad thing either.
I always like to give people time back to their day. So I appreciate everybody coming out, and hopefully it was informative. And Sally, thanks so much for having me today.
Thank you, Sarah. Thanks, everyone, for stopping by.